Today we're going to talk about AI agents versus traditional automation and which is better, and more importantly, like when to use one and when to use the other. I'm not going to bury the lead here. You probably want to be using both, ideally, and use them in combination in concert with each other, right? So there's some scenarios where traditional makes sense, and most scenarios where an AI agent makes more sense, right? And we'll get into the differences here. So traditional automation, as most of you probably know, is typically predefined workflows with scripts that execute specific tasks consistently. And the tasks are often repetitive and routine, right? So just very clear step-by-step workflows that are easy to kind of automate because none of the data really changes all that much. And the process to do the workflow or the task doesn't really change all that much, right? It's the same thing every single time. AI agents, on the other hand, are autonomous, adaptive, and context aware. They're capable of learning from data and past experiences to make informed decisions. They can adapt their behavior based on new information and changing environments. So essentially, it means that it's taking traditional automation one step further by allowing some reasoning ability, some decision making ability, and the just ability to understand natural language and extract data or parse data or manipulate data accordingly, right? Or change the steps that it takes to complete a workflow or complete a certain task or objective based on the incoming data, right? And based on its understanding and its knowledge base, right? So if there's ever a scenario where it's not kind of like step by step, this is exactly what needs to happen because we know that the same thing happens every single time. If it's not that scenario, then AI agents typically work better because they can obviously adjust and they're flexible enough to use the tools at their disposal to get the job done, no matter what the situation is, usually. So, what are the key differences here? So, in terms of flexibility, traditional automation is very limited and or limited to specific repetitive tasks, right? And AI agents can adapt to new tasks and learn from experiences. So our agents get better the more they are fielding inbound emails or generating like lead nurturing emails or doing answered customer success questions or anything like that, right? They're getting better over time. Traditional automation just does the same thing every single time. There is no improvement to it, but it's really good at just accomplishing like very specific repetitive tasks, right? It's almost like I'm repeating what I'm saying with some of this stuff. Scalability. So traditional automation requires manual updates for scaling. Every little change to a workflow requires an update to the automation. So essentially, like let's say like a kind of like an edge case scenario that happens where the data that's coming in is varied. It's not the same every single time, and the automation is supposed to kind of extract that data, manipulate it in some way, and then put it somewhere else, right? Traditional automation will just break, right? It's just not going to work because the inputs that you have lined up aren't going to line up when the data comes in a little bit different than before. Even like a micro change, even stuff like the case is wrong, right? Like you have an uppercase at the beginning of a word and it's expecting like it to be all lowercase. Boom, your automation is done, right? Um, so even if like the workflow changes slightly, right? Everyone's workflow evolves a little bit. Like if you're doing prospecting or something, maybe the first month you're used to getting on LinkedIn and getting like searching for a bunch of people using the search bar and saving their profile links in a spreadsheet and then going through each one by one to do a little bit of research and saving that research back into the spreadsheet and then going back and reaching out to these people, right? Maybe like that's your typical workflow as a person. But then let's say you're like, oh man, this is just like taking way too long. I'm going to change. I'm going to just evolve, right? I'm just going to change the next day exactly what I'm doing. So instead of putting everybody in a spreadsheet and then going and doing research, I'm just going to do research in the moment and put all of that in the spreadsheet right there. So it's like a micro change to the workflow that um, a person can make because they're learning and they're making new decisions just based on their experience, right? Having done the workflow. AI agents automatically scale as they learn and grow. Changes to workflows are easily handled because the agent uses its reasoning ability to accomplish its tasks. Right. The beauty about agents is all we have to do is give them a bunch of tools, prompt them correctly, and they should be able to handle any changes or uh, to a workflow that they're designed to do because they have the tools to do the thing regardless. And so like if they're planning a workflow where it is a let's say it's an onboarding workflow, right? And you could set up a traditional automation where the moment that you mark an account as closed one in your CRM, the contacts of the account immediately get a welcome email. The welcome email has a link into it to go to kind of like an onboarding video to talk about next steps, expectations of working with you, etc. And then they on that page they schedule a kickoff call, right? That's basically our onboarding workflow right there. But let's say you wanted to make a change to the onboarding workflow because a specific client like needs, um, maybe like the onboarding steps in the email itself are different for this client because you're doing kind of like a different project. Traditional automation is going to break, but the agent can dynamically change the email based on the account, right? And so like you kind of just need an onboarding agent, and generally what the workflow is, the components of the what the workflow is, right? Like send a welcome email, collect these data pieces, right? Schedule a kickoff call. Like those are the broad components to it, but the actual like these are the words to send in the welcome email. This is the exact like prep document that we need for a kickoff call, or these are the exact platforms we need them to sign up for, right? Or login information that we need to collect from them, whatever it is, right? Um, Essentially, agents are more scalable because all you need to do is give them tools, and the workflow itself can evolve just as long as they have the tools, because the agents can reason and they can handle, right, and plan the steps that it takes. Contextual awareness. So obviously traditional automation doesn't really have context in general. I say operates with fixed context, but realistically it doesn't really have context. It just has the data that you input it into. It has like its rule set, exactly what it's supposed to do with that data, and then it does the thing, right? It doesn't understand where it fits into its entire process, right? But AI agents, obviously, because we give them a database, a contextual database, they understand what the context is and what they're doing. We also prompt them. So in our prompts, we always put like context of like where exactly its role is in the entire job function, in the entire workflow, and in the business in some cases, right? And so it obviously helps the agents like actually make decisions just based on that context. And an even more like precise example is, let's say like you had a traditional automation that was to send, marketing emails, or we'll call them lead nurturing emails. Stay with kind of a similar example. Let's say you had automation to send lead nurturing emails, and you wanted to send very personalized touch points to people, and you were using a traditional automation. Well, the actual message that you're sending is going to be the same one, right? And then maybe you have like one line in there that's like varied, right? Like maybe it's randomized or something, and it's just kind of like a randomized line, or maybe you input the company name, some kind of variable in there, right? But I think we've all seen those emails where it's like clearly this is a templated email, and they just kind of like put a variable in there for my name and for my company name, and maybe like some information on my website that they scraped. Um, we've all seen those emails, and how effective are they actually, right? They're clearly sent as templated automated emails that aren't as in-depth or detailed about you and your experience as they're trying to come off and seem. But an agent can understand the context of the conversations that have been had with the prospect, the context of who they are, the company they work in, what their job role is, what might resonate with them, the things that they have done recently, right? That might resonate, the content that they have posted recently, and it can actually like develop a message that is like genuinely going to resonate with them, right? Because it's not like, okay, I assume that if I mention their company name, and if I mentioned kind of like a short blurb from their website, like whatever their headline is or whatever their catchphrase is or whatever, if I put that in there as a variable, like somehow that's going to grab their attention and make them interested in talking with me. But the reality is, I think everyone sees through that. And working with agents actually allows you to generate a genuinely good email, because you can put in the parameters about what to search for, what information to use when drafting the personalized emails. So you're still putting a lot of input in there in terms of like, here are the things that matter to me. Like if this person, I used to live in New York City. If this person lives in New York City, that's a really key point of relevance for me. That's something that you should mention. I'm from Texas. If this person is from Texas, really key point of relevance to me, that's a point of connection that we can have. Make sure you mention that if it's true, right? And then a number of other things that are relevant to me that I think could be really, really good points of connection. I don't have the time to go write out 100 emails a day, to send, but at least like the um, the attempt is there. The attempt is genuine, right? It's just like the agent is just the one who's actually writing the email, but I give it instructions on how to write it, what my personality type is, what my content preferences are, and then the points of connection to really dial in on. And so it's like all of those things I would have done myself. The only difference is I'm not actually writing it. The agent is writing it, right? And that's context. And there's more like agents being context aware, I think is probably the biggest benefit that agents have. But traditional automations do have some benefits as well. Decision making. Traditional automation follows predefined rules, like I said, and then agents can make complex decisions based on data, right? I'm not going to get into that one because I think that's self-explanatory. So use cases and applications. Traditional automation, I listed out 5 for each, but there's obviously, we could go on for days, but simple data entry, right? Generating and sending onboarding documents with variables. Rule-based chatbots that provide predefined answers. So we've all engaged with chatbots like this on maybe an e-commerce site or any kind of like site where we've there's a chatbot there. You talk to the chatbot, and it's pretty much just like going to give you the predefined response every time, right? And it ultimately ends up not being very helpful, and you just say like speak to a person, right, or speak to a representative, whatever it is. When you get to that point, sometimes they are able to provide answers, but most of the time it just doesn't. It's just not great, right? Because it doesn't understand what you're saying. Like it doesn't truly understand what you're saying. It's just picking up on keywords and then providing kind of like a canned answer that was already pre-written. Anyway, automatically sorting incoming emails. Rigid rules about how to sort them, right? They need to be predefined rules. It can't be like, let's say you get an email from an account from a person, right? And it's a sales email. It lands in your inbox. It doesn't go to spam, and it might look legit to maybe someone who doesn't know your company. Like maybe it's not even like a super salesy email. Maybe it's somebody who's clearly trying to do sales, but maybe they're a little bit clever and they're sending you an email that doesn't have a call to action to like hop on a call or buy their services or whatever, right? The call to action is a little bit ambiguous, and it's probably a good one. Let's say that email came into a traditional automation. How is it going to sort it? How is it going to know if it's a lead? I mean, you can set up ways where it can cross-check against your database, but what if that person's not in your database? What if they are a lead and they're not in your database and they're reaching out, and the traditional automation can't really tell, and it's just gets automatically sorted into the wrong bucket, and you lose out on that, right? So you need some kind of reasoning to happen when you're sorting emails most of the time. Extracting data from invoices and entering into an accounting system. It's very similar to simple data entry, just taking one piece of data that's consistently going to be that piece of data, the same type of data, and putting it in the exact same place every time. Just boom, 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 right? Just automation. AI agents. So some examples. Analyze customer behavior to send personalized product recommendations. Provide context-aware responses and quick responses to clients. Update project statuses, assign tasks, and predict project timelines. Generate content ideas, draft posts, and schedule posts. Dynamically manage inboxes, CRMs, project management software, etc. Right. So we like to have agents that are kind of monitoring and managing each of the platforms, and then sometimes, those are the agents that are like retrieving data or sending data to a different agent who needs that data at the time of execution or whatever. Sometimes we don't need that. Sometimes we just need a tool. But, the thing is, the reason why we continue to use software platforms to do our work instead of just having a lot of the data entry and stuff be automated is because there is a level of reasoning that needs to happen in order for you to accurately put in that data, right? Like, let's say you hop off a call. This is pre AI. You hop off a call with a client. You're doing sales. Maybe you're doing customer success, right, or project management. But you're on a call with a client or a prospect. You're taking notes during that call, pre AI. You're taking notes during that call, and then you're summarizing those notes and putting them back into the project management thing or CRM, and like literally like the taking of the notes and the summarizing them and putting them in the correct place inside of the software. It's like, how often are we doing that? We don't even think about that as like a mundane, annoying thing to do necessarily. Sometimes we do if you do sales, but we're not even really thinking about that as oh man, my job sucks because I have to like take notes on a call. No one's saying that. But the reality is tasks like that start to add up, and instead of them being kind of just the cost of doing business or the cost of having a job and working a career, um, we should just eliminate those entirely, right? Just eliminate those small tasks. Part of me thinks that like some of those small tasks like really make people feel like productive. So you just end up doing a bunch of small tasks, cleaning up your pipeline or cleaning up your CRM or project management thing, and making sure the data is doing some data hygiene, right? And it makes you feel productive, but we don't have to do that anymore with agents, right? We can focus on the things that are big and will lead to more growth. Yeah, I think the rest of it makes sense, right? Like AI agents versus traditional automation in terms of like actual use cases, anything where you have to generate something kind of new or based on an example or something where it's not just like variable placement that's going to be different, but the actual thing will be different, right? The actual content will be different, or making decisions on where to place certain pieces of data, or making decisions on which tools to use, which automations to use, right? And we'll get into the combination of the two in a second. But so pros and cons. I think you get the idea now, but the pros, obviously, of traditional automation are stability, reliability, predictability. They're easier to implement and manage for simple tasks. Whipping up a traditional automation workflow, very easy to do, very simple. A lot of people can learn how to do it by watching YouTube videos. They can learn how to do it in a couple hours for probably whatever workflow they need. But like I said, like stability, reliability, predictable, they're doing the same thing every single time. You know exactly what to expect with a traditional automation thing. The issue is our lack of adaptability requires constant updates for new tasks. So any little change that happens, you need to go back into the automation and make an adjustment, right? A lot of times, like what ends up happening is like you have, a good automation that's working, and then maybe you hire a new person, or you kind of like slightly change your workflow, and then the automation breaks entirely, and you have to go in there and fix it. On the flip side, what happens is you end up your team ends up working around the automation as opposed to the automation like working for you. And you see a similar complaint with like Amazon warehouse workers where they say like, it seems like I'm working for the robots rather than the robots working for me, because the robots are just on a schedule doing exactly what they're supposed to do. The humans can adjust and change and adapt based on the changing environment. And so when things are going a little bit slower, like another human can recognize that and then slow their pace down as well. Robot obviously can't, and so the human feels like they have to keep up with the robot. Traditional automation really makes you feel very, very similar. It's like, man, do I really want to um, hire another person? Because that means I'm going to have to change all of my automations, right? Or create entirely new automations for them, right? Or have to just go in and make all these adjustments if I just hire a new person. So every time you make a change, you have to go and adjust the automations. It makes it hard to scale in general. Agents, the pros, they're adaptable, intelligent, and contextually aware. They have an ability to handle complex tasks and make decisions, obviously. And the con is there is some complexity in implementing them, and they require quality data. They are they're only as good as the data you give them ultimately. And so in order for them to perform well, the incoming data that they're receiving needs to be quality. The knowledge-based data that they have needs to be high quality, and the prompts I'm counting as data need to be extremely high quality, right? So those are the only cons really for agents, is just in terms of the setup. If you don't set it up properly, they're just not going to scale well with you or for you, and they're just not going to perform well, just in general, right? But obviously, they're really, really good at making human. It's almost like just putting a human in the loop of an automation, almost, right? Or it's giving like it's as if you had like a human that is just um, deciding what to do when something happens, and triggering automations that maybe you have like a bunch of hard automations, and they're all triggered by an agent rather than some event, and the agent can decide when to use the automation, right? That's a little bit different than Like every time something happens, then this happens, like if then statements, right? Because things change. So which is better? When would you choose traditional automation? So obviously, which is better depends, but I would do traditional automation when it's straightforward, repetitive tasks that aren't really going to change, right? Just simple data entry. Move this piece of data here, and you know that the place you're moving it from and the place you're moving it to isn't really going to change, and the type of data isn't really going to change, right? Super easy. Just create a traditional automation thing for that. You don't need to build an AI agent. It's almost like a waste of the agent's like potential if you build an agent rather than traditional automation in this case. When to choose AI agent. Ideal for dynamic environments with complex decision making. And I would think when you're thinking about getting an agent or doing traditional automation, you should think, does this workflow require a human in the loop? And if so, can an agent do it instead? So oftentimes we hire virtual assistants because we've tried to automate as much as possible, but there's still kind of like that last mile that needs to be handled by a person. And so we hire like virtual assistants, right, to do that last mile, typically, or like personal assistants. But instead of hiring an assistant or kind of like an entry level or lower level employee, now we can just get agents to do that, right? And we can teach them exactly what we want. And we don't have to pay them a salary, which obviously, is huge. Combination approach. So sometimes you need both. And the great way, a good thing, I'm just going to move this really quick. Okay. So a good thing about building agents in N8N, which is where we build agents, is you can build traditional automation workflows, but then you can use those workflows as tools for the agents. So we have an automation that just searches the web and gathers a list of LinkedIn profiles and puts them in a spreadsheet. And it builds and it searches the web for profiles based on like our parameters. So I just say to the agent, like, hey, can you give me a list of like 500 agency founders located in Austin, Texas, who work in the crypto space, right? It'll go do the Google search, extract all the LinkedIn profiles, all 500, put them in a list, right? That's just like a basic automation. There's no need for an agent there. There is some like AI reasoning involved in that, just a little bit, but actually there might not be. There is, because when I say get me a list of 500 agency owners in Austin who are doing marketing, when I say that, we use AI to understand what I'm saying to then craft the search query to put into Google. So in that case, that's a bad example. But like let's assume there was no thing. Let's assume that I just put in the link, the Google search link every time. I didn't actually like prompt it with like natural language, but I did the search myself and I put the link in, and then I just wanted to go extract the profile links. Let's say now that I just had an agent that did that for me, and let's say I told the agent like, hey, can you reach out to 100? Can you do research and reach out to 100 agency owners and let them know that I have this really great offer. We're doing 60% off for the next 2 weeks. Just like let them know, right? Like get all their emails, get their LinkedIn, and let them know. It's like, okay, great. Now we need an agent to coordinate all of this. We need an automation to go and find all the accounts. We need an automation to go and scrape information for those accounts. We need an automation to find email addresses as well. And maybe we probably need a couple others, right? Like, but the agent is going to coordinate that. So it's like, okay, go find the accounts. Great. You found the accounts. Now let's do research on the accounts. Awesome. We did research. Now let's identify the ones that we think would be a good fit. Okay. We just qualified. Now let's craft an email and let's go send an email. Right. And before that, let's go find their email accounts. Right. So multi-step approach to completing that workflow. And the workflow was just reach out to 100 people in our ICP to let them know about our offer. That's something that you would probably delegate to an SDR or a virtual assistant in the past, but you can whip up a couple of agents to just go and do that for you, right? And then now imagine you had multiple teams. Like now, like I had an example in an earlier video just about podcasts. Like I know a lot of agency owners want to just get on podcasts because it's a really good sales opportunity or marketing opportunity. And it's like, well, yeah, I would love to get on podcasts, but I'm dealing with clients and I'm doing my own sales and I'm creating content and I'm managing my team. Like, I don't really have the bandwidth to just start reaching out to a bunch of podcast hosts. So it's like, just build a team of agents to do that, because you understand what the workflow is. It's just like, find the right person, find their contact information, write a really good email, compelling, that you think is going to resonate with them, and send it. And just do that a bunch of times until you get your calendar filled up with podcast interviews. It's like, most of these workflows are not very complex. We understand what to do. The issue is, like, we don't have the bandwidth or the money to do it. We'd like to delegate it. We can't automate it because it's an evolved workflow with multiple steps. So now we're in this weird phase where it's like, this isn't maybe important enough to hire somebody for, or for me to spend my time doing this. But it's not simple enough to just like automate traditionally, right? So it's like this weird like limbo area. And there's so many workflows like this, being an agency owner, where it's kind of that limbo area, like spitting up a newsletter, like doing prospecting, right? Um, a lot of things on the operation and delivery side. It depends like what you're offering. The reason I talk about sales mostly and lead gen, just as an aside, is because that is like kind of the most common thing amongst all businesses, but particularly agencies. Like, their approach to sales and marketing is very similar. Obviously, like the delivery side, it totally depends what your niche is. But needless to say, I say that to say that when you're thinking about workflows that you'd like to do, and they're kind of in that weird limbo area of, I wish I could just automate this, but I can't because it requires some reasoning. And it's really not that important or complex enough to like hire a whole person or take the time out of somebody on my team, take their time to go do this. And so you traditionally think like, I'm just not going to do it. Now we have agents who can do that stuff for you. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Traditional automation versus AI agents. I think the differences are clear. The benefits of each are very clear. But sooner rather than later, we're probably going to see more agents in the wild than just traditional automated workflows, because they're a lot more flexible. All you have to do is give them tools and instructions, and objectives, and they can go ahead and complete any automation or any workflow. You don't have to spell it out exactly what's supposed to happen, right? Some cases you want to do that, but soon, most cases, you're not going to want to do that or need to do that, right? So, yeah, that's all I got for today.